The hegemony swarm moved like a plague across the stars, their thousand-ship armada blotting out entire constellations as they swept toward the Terran system. For 3 millennia, no species had offered meaningful resistance. The pattern was always the same: terror, surrender, absorption. Entire civilizations would broadcast their submission the moment the swarm's shadow fell across their worlds. Fleet Commander Zix Thala observed the approaching human system from the bridge of the Bree, Void Render, flagship of the Conquest Fleet. Through compound eyes that had witnessed the fall of 100 worlds, she watched her scouts report back with familiar efficiency. The humans possessed only primitive fusion drives, projectile weapons, and a handful of orbital stations. Their entire fleet consisted of perhaps 30 vessels, most barely worthy of the name Warship. Another species that never learned to reach for the stars properly. Her tactical officer, Krianis, shuddered with amusement. "Shall we broadcast the standard surrender demand, Fleet Commander?" Zix Thala's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The humans intrigued her slightly. Their radio transmissions showed remarkable diversity of thought and culture, unlike the hive-minded species that typically evolved to space travel. But intrigue was a luxury. The hegemony's expansion schedule demanded efficiency. "Send the demand," she ordered. "Give them 1 solar rotation to respond." The message that went out was simple and had never been refused. Surrender your weapons. Submit to integration, and your species will be preserved as useful components of the hegemony. Resist and face extinction. But as the swarm approached the outer planets, something unprecedented happened. A single human warship smaller than even their escort, vessels detached from the defensive formations around Mars and began accelerating directly toward the invasion fleet. The ship's identification signature read, UESS Defiant. "Commander," Krianos reported, his voice carrying the first note of uncertainty Zix Thala had heard from him in decades. "The human vessel is ... positioning itself in our direct path." Zix Thala leaned forward, her attention fully captured. In 3,000 years of conquest, no single enemy vessel had ever deliberately positioned itself between the swarm and their target. Ships fled, ships hid, ships formed desperate defensive formations, but they never advanced alone to meet certain death. "Are they malfunctioning?" she asked. "Negative, Fleet Commander. All systems appear optimal. They're waiting for us." Through the vast emptiness of space, across millions of kilometers, 2 forces faced each other, one overwhelming in its multitude, the other singular in its defiance. The Defiant hung motionless against the star field, a tiny speck of human engineering and determination positioned, like a cork in the mouth of an unstoppable bottle. For the first time in her long career of conquest, Fleet Commander Zix Thala felt something she didn't recognize: curiosity, mixed with the faintest thread of unease. Captain Sarah Chon stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the tactical display. The hegemony fleet filled the screen like a cancer, 1,000 points of light representing death and subjugation. Her crew of 112 souls worked with quiet efficiency around her, each knowing they were about to become history. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, her XO and oldest friend, "the alien fleet is slowing. They seem confused by our position." Sean allowed herself a grim smile. "Good. Confusion is the first crack in their certainty." Her communications officer, Ensign David Park, looked up from his station with barely controlled terror and excitement warring in his young face. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. Audio only, but our linguists have been working on their language patterns from intercepted communications. Put it through." The bridge filled with a sound like grinding metal and chittering insects. The translation software converted it to flat, mechanical English. "Human vessel, you are blocking our path. Move aside or be destroyed." This is your only warning. Shan walked to her command chair, but didn't sit. Instead, she placed her hand on the armrest and spoke clearly. Communications. Open a channel to the hegemony. Fleet. Full broadcast, maximum power. Channel open, Captain. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Defiant. I speak for humanity when I say, you cannot pass. This system is under our protection. Turn back now, while you still can. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a full minute. When the reply came, the alien voice carried what sounded almost like amusement. Captain Chun, we are one. 1,000 ships. You are one. Do you not understand mathematics? Chun's tactical officer, Commander Wei Zhang, whispered urgently. Captain, they're moving into attack formation. We have perhaps 10 minutes before they're in firing range. But Chun kept her eyes on the main screen, watching the alien armada spread like a predator's wings. I understand mathematics perfectly, hegemony, but you clearly don't understand humanity. We've calculated the odds, and we're still here. You will die uselessly, came the reply. Maybe, Chun acknowledged, but we'll die as free humans, fighting for our home. Can you say the same about your last conquest? Did anyone stand against you at Proxima Centauri? At Wolf 359? At Kepler 442? This time, the silence stretched longer. Finally, they were wise. They chose survival. They chose slavery. Chun corrected. We choose death before dishonor. But here's what you don't understand about humans. We've never been particularly good at dying quietly. Behind her, she heard Santos muttering prayers in Spanish, while Parks. Fingers flew over his console, broadcasting their confrontation across every frequency humanity used. The entire galaxy would witness this moment. Last warning, human ship. Stand aside. Chun finally sat in her command chair, her voice carrying across the bridge and into the void beyond. No, you want our system. You go through us first. Asterisk Fleet Commander. Zixthyla paced the bridge of the void render, her talons clicking against the metal deck with increasing agitation. In the 3 hours since the human captain's declaration, her fleet had advanced to within weapons range, yet the single enemy. Ship remained motionless in their path. Status report, she commanded. Commander Vexlac consulted his instruments. The human vessel maintains position. No change in energy signatures, no sign of retreat. They appear to be waiting. Waiting for what? Zixthyla snapped. Reinforcements? Their entire fleet couldn't challenge a single squadron of our escorts. Perhaps, suggested Tactical Coordinator Morthus, they hope to damage our lead ships before being destroyed. A Pyrrhic gesture of spite. But Zixthyla wasn't convinced. She had studied the intercepted human communications, their art, their history. These creatures were chaotic, unpredictable, but not suicidal. At least, not without purpose. Commander, reported her communications specialist, the human ship is broadcasting on all frequencies. The transmission is being picked up by species. Throughout this spiral arm of the galaxy. What are they saying? It's single quotes S.complex. They're not pleading for aid or mercy. They're telling the story of their stand, making it into some kind of ... legend. Zixthyla's compound eyes narrowed. The hegemony's success had always depended on two factors: overwhelming force and the psychological certainty of that force. Species surrendered because resistance was obviously futile. But what happened when someone refused to acknowledge futility? Fleet Commander, Vexlac's voice carried concern. We're receiving reports from across the fleet. Some of our junior officers are questioning the wisdom of our approach. Questioning how. They want to know why we don't simply go around the human ship. Our formation is flexible enough to bypass them without difficulty. Zixthala felt her mandibles click involuntarily. The same thought had occurred to her, but she recognized it for what it was, the first sign of doubt. The hegemony didn't go around obstacles. They destroyed them. To deviate now would send a message across the galaxy that they could be deterred. But to destroy a single ship that posed no real threat would also send a message that they feared even token resistance enough to waste firepower on it. "The human vessel is hailing us again," reported communications. "Put it through." Captain Chun's voice filled the bridge, calm and steady. "Fleet Commander Zixthala, I presume? I wanted to give you a chance to reconsider. You've conquered 1,000 worlds, absorbed 1,000,000 species. Has any of it brought you satisfaction?" "Satisfaction is irrelevant," Zixthala replied. "The hegemony expands because expansion is our nature. And resistance is ours," Chun responded. "But here's the thing we know you could destroy us easily. The question is, what does it cost you to do it?" "Nothing," Zixthala said, but even as the words left her mandibles, she knew they weren't true. Every moment they spent confronting this single ship was a moment not spent advancing toward their goal. Every second her officers spent questioning their methods was a crack in their certainty. "Commander," whispered Vexlac, "the human ship is still just sitting there." And that, Zixthala realized with growing unease, was perhaps the most unsettling thing of all. Asterisk, asterisk. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds under hegemony rule, screens flickered with the impossible image. One small human warship, standing alone against the vast armada that had conquered them all. On the former Centaurian colony of New Geneva, Administrator Veltar watched the transmission with growing alarm. The reptilian beings under his governance had been model subjects for 2 centuries, compliant, productive, grateful for their preservation. But now they gathered in public spaces, staring at displays with an expression he'd never seen before. "What are they doing?" he asked his aide. "They call it hope, Administrator. It's a concept from their pre-conquest literature." Meanwhile, aboard the Defiant, Captain Chun received reports that both thrilled and terrified her. "Captain," Ensign Park reported, his voice tight with excitement, "we're getting response signals from across the galaxy. Species that haven't transmitted on open frequencies in centuries are acknowledging our signal." "What are they saying?" "Most are just ... watching, but some are beginning to ask questions. The hegemony's regional administrators are reporting unusual behavior from their subject populations." Commander Santos leaned closer to Chun. "Sarah, what have we started?" Before Chun could answer, the hegemony fleet began moving. Not forward, into attack formation, but into a complex pattern that surrounded the Defiant without approaching close enough for effective weapons range. "They're stalling," observed Commander Zhang from Tactical. "They don't want to destroy us while the galaxy is watching, but they can't back down either." Chun studied the display, watching the massive ships maneuver around her tiny vessel like wolves, circling prey that might be diseased. They're in a trap of their own making. 3,000 years of never facing real defiance, and now they don't know how to handle it. The communications array crackled with an incoming transmission from Zixthala. "Captain Chun, we offer you terms. Surrender your vessel, and your crew will be relocated to a pleasant world where they can live out their natural lives." "Counteroffer," Chun replied immediately. "You turn your fleet around and leave this system. We'll even let you keep your dignity, tell your superiors we were too well defended to be worth the cost." "Impossible." "Then we're at an impasse." Chun settled back in her chair. The interesting thing about impasses is that they favor the side with less to lose. On the hegemony flagship, Zixthala consulted with her senior staff. Sub-Commander Vexlac presented the tactical situation with growing concern. "Fleet Commander, our intelligence networks report increasing unrest on 17 worlds." The Proximan sector has gone completely silent. We believe they've cut there. Communications rather than risk contamination from the human broadcast. Contamination? The idea that resistance is possible, even if hopeless. Zixthyla realized they faced something unprecedented in hegemony history. An enemy whose greatest weapon wasn't firepower, but example. The Defiant wasn't trying to win a battle. It was trying to start a revolution. How long can we maintain this standoff? She asked. Indefinitely, from a tactical standpoint. But psychologically, ... Vexlac hesitated. Our crews are beginning to ask why we don't simply destroy the human ship and move on. And what do you tell them? I don't know what to tell them, Fleet Commander. Because I'm beginning to wonder the same thing. 48 hours into the standoff, the galaxy had changed. From the outer rim to the galactic core, subject species whispered the name Defiant like a prayer. The hegemony's perfect machine of conquest faced its first existential crisis, not from superior firepower, but from the simple act of witnessing. Courage. Captain Chun stood before the memorial wall in her ready room, reading the names of every crew member who had volunteered for this mission, knowing it was suicide. She'd given everyone the chance to transfer off before they took position. Not one had left. A soft chime announced Commander Santos entering. Sarah, you need to see this. Chun followed her to the bridge, where Ensign Park was monitoring communications with tears streaming down his face. Captain, he said, his voice. Breaking, we're receiving transmission from Kepler 442. The entire planet is ... They're rising up. They're actually fighting back. The main screen filled with chaotic images alien beings, Sean didn't recognize destroying hegemony installations. Overwhelming garrison forces through sheer numbers and desperate courage. It's spreading, Santos whispered. 17 systems now. The hegemony is having to redirect fleets to contain the uprisings. Chun felt a weight settle on her shoulders, the weight of responsibility for lives across the galaxy. How many dead? Millions, probably. These aren't military forces, Sarah. They're civilians with farm tools and improvised weapons, fighting soldiers who've conquered the galaxy. Did we do the right thing? Chun asked, though she wasn't sure who she was asking. The answer came from an unexpected source. Zixthyla's voice filled the bridge. Captain Chun, I request a private communication. Put her through to my ready room. Alone with the alien fleet commander's image on her screen, Chun saw something she hadn't expected: exhaustion. You've won, Zixthyla said simply. We're still one ship against 1,000. No, you're an idea that has infected half the galaxy. My superiors are ordering me to destroy you immediately and move on, but we both know it's too late for that. Chun leaned forward. What will you do? My duty. But I wanted you to know, in 3 millennia of conquest, no one has ever made me question whether we were the inevitable force we believed ourselves to be. Your species has a word for what you've accomplished. Pyrrhic victory. You'll die, but you've wounded us in ways we never knew we could be wounded. Maybe that's enough, Chun said softly. Perhaps, Captain. Why didn't you run? Why didn't you try to negotiate? Why stand here and die for nothing? Chun smiled sadly. Because it wasn't for nothing. It was for the idea that someone, somewhere, should always be willing to say no to tyranny, no matter the cost. Even if we lose, especially if we lose, someone needs to remember that the fight was worth fighting. The transmission ended. Chun returned to her bridge, where her crew waited with quiet dignity. Outside, the hegemony fleet moved into final attack formation. All hands, Chun announced over the ship's intercom. This is your captain. We came here to buy humanity time and to show the galaxy what defiance looks like. Mission accomplished. Whatever happens next, remember we stood when standing mattered. The first energy beams lanced out from the alien fleet, and the U.E.'s Defiant burned like a star against the darkness. But across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, people looked up and remembered that someone had stood against impossible odds, and that memory would prove more dangerous to the hegemony than any weapon. Asterisk.